Nondini Naqui.
This is super impressive and amazing. I'm so excited to be here today. So my name is Nondini Naqui. I am the former president and CEO of Society of Grown-Ups. So raise your hand if you've heard of Society of Grown-Ups. Oh my God. This is the closest I will ever get to being a rock star. So just gonna soak that up. Okay, so what I want to talk about a little bit today is something that we actually don't talk about, and that is money. Okay. So how many of you feel really comfortable talking to your friends about how much money you make? All right. We've got a few really brave souls. Awesome. Okay. And how many of you feel really comfortable talking about your credit score with your significant other? Okay, good. Relationships are in a good place. Okay, good. But have you ever wondered about why it feels so awkward and so weird to talk about money? I mean, that's what I think about all the time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own personal story. So I have believed that money is a weird and awkward and rude topic of conversation since before I went to kindergarten. So I came to this country when I was just shy of my 2nd birthday, and I came here with my parents, and my dad was a postdoc at University of Pennsylvania. And my dad made $13,000 a year. So $13,000 a year, even in the early 80s, is really not a lot of money. And they had to make really hard decisions and difficult choices, but yet we never talked about it. Like my dad used to walk 20 blocks so we didn't have to pay the bus fare. But they made trade-offs. They made sure that every single cent that they had, they put towards me and my education, and making sure I had a uniform and good shoes to wear and stuff like that. So they spent according to their priorities. But even though money was so top of mind for them, they actually spoke in a foreign language when they talked about it. So I come from a family that speaks 3 languages, Bengali, English, and Russian. I know, surprising, right? And my parents both met at Moscow State University, so they're fluent in Russian. And we'd be sitting around the dinner table, and they would break into Russian, and I knew it was one of 2 things. I was in trouble, or they were talking about money. So from my earliest experiences, these roots are really, really deep when it comes to how we actually feel and what our attitudes are around money. And this attitude actually persisted for me throughout my life. I grew up, I went to college, I made a bunch of friends. I mean, listen, my college friends and I have gone through everything together. Adulthood in every way. We know each other's dating histories. We know each other's religious musings. We know about our political leanings, but we have never, ever, ever talked about money. So what's being left on the table by not having this conversation? This is not going to surprise any of you. We live in a world that is full of real pressures. People have student loan debt. Does that sound familiar to any of you? Yeah? So unprecedented levels of student loan debt. Wages are not increasing at a fast rate. Does that sound familiar too? And we also see that credit card debt is increasing as well. And what does that mean for all of us? It means that we're getting squeezed and squeezed to do more with less. And the only thing that makes that even harder is feeling like you're doing it alone. And so, by really recognizing that this was a problem that needed to be addressed, That was the impetus for the concept of the Society of Grown-ups. It was based on a radical and daring experiment and idea that, you know what? What if we blew this whole thing up? What if we actually built a community around a taboo topic like money? And so in October of 2014, we launched the Society of Grown-ups with a physical location in Brookline and a digital platform as well. And it has been an absolutely amazing and unexpected ride. But there's one thing. When we talked about what this concept was and we talked about what we were doing, there was never a single person that said, I don't need that, my friend doesn't need that, or my kid doesn't need that. Everyone recognized that this was a conversation that needed to happen. So, as we're making decisions as adults and as grown-ups, there's a lot of different factors at play. So, the whole theme of this talk is transparency. And so let's talk about some of the transparency that exists or does not exist within financial services. Do any of you know how your bank makes money? We've got 3 people. Please ask them after the talk about how that works. Because here's the thing, we don't really understand, what financial services is doing or what happens to our money, but there's a financial underpinning to some of the most personal decisions that we make. Like moving in with your significant other. That's a financial decision. Deciding to get married. That's a financial decision. Trying to figure out if you should have a family, and if you should have a kid, and if you can afford to have a kid. Talk about a deeply, deeply personal conversation that has a strong financial underpinning. Yet, this conversation for too long has revolved around dollars and cents, and how much you have in your bank balance, and how much money you have, and how much money you wish you had, and it looks like a totally clinical exercise. But truthfully, in order to really get to the heart of this issue, we have to look at it holistically. We have to think about how deep those roots are. That it could be a 3-year-old at a dinner table who starts to get that pain in her stomach when her parents switch to a different language. That's really where the conversation can start. So, when it comes to judgment, that's one of the things that we've learned. That we judge ourselves and we judge one another, and one of the ways we can do that is actually talking about money. You don't have to raise your hand for this one. But have you ever said to yourself, or maybe out loud, I don't know how she can afford those boots. Or I can't believe that he has that kind of a car. Or how can he afford to buy that place? So we have a little bit of a judgmental saltiness to us when it comes to money. And that judgmental voice is dangerous for a couple of different reasons. One, it means that we look at one another without a lot of empathy. And 2, we turn that voice on ourselves, which just means that we become more and more muted in this conversation. At least that was my experience. So, as I mentioned, the Society of Grown-ups was a bold and daring experiment to try to actually address some of these issues and talk about it in a way that had not been done before. It was about engaging people in a way, like, for example, we had supper clubs. And supper clubs were 12 or 14 people sitting around a dinner table, eating food, drinking wine, which also helps a lot in opening up this conversation. And we had a certified financial planner sitting at that table with them. And they were able to ask questions, and they were able to learn from one another. And something really beautiful and magical was happening. But that was something that we didn't know if it was going to work or not. Because how do you know if a bunch of strangers actually are going to want to sit around and talk about something so deeply personal? The truth is that people do want to talk about it. Because this generation, despite the pressures, the enormous pressures against them, are one of the most entrepreneurial, creative, interesting generations that actually wants to have agency in their own lives, that wants to talk about their values, like meaningful work, like doing something that has an impact and that matters, and then how do you actually balance that with the financial realities of trying to pay your rent and trying to also go out with your friends and also go on vacation every once in a while. And so that was super exciting because people were coming in and they were talking to one another and they were learning from one another, and the conversation was really getting started. And we started to hear more and more from others about the actual impact that we were having on people's lives. So we had one couple that came in, they're expecting, and every single dollar of their discretionary income was going into something called the house fund. Here's the problem. They didn't want to buy a house. If you really, really dug into it, what was happening was that they were like, well, we're about to have a family, we can't afford to buy in the city, so we should buy in the suburbs, so that's where we're putting this money away, and all of the magic and all of the joy was draining out of their faces as they were saying this, because they felt like that was what they should be doing. And when we were able to talk to them and say, listen, it's actually not financially irresponsible for you to continue to rent on a long-term basis and keep walking through the park that you love on your way to your favorite coffee shop. There was like a burden that was lifted off of their shoulders because they felt finally like they were able to be empowered to make decisions according to what was important to them and the joy that they had in their lives. And I think that's an extremely important conversation, because just sitting on a big pile of money at age 65 just may not be the narrative that everyone is looking for. It may be, but it may not be. We also talked to people who had non-traditional paths. Like, they didn't want to just retire at 65. They wanted to take some smaller retirements along the way. You know, take a few months off here and a few months off there and just continue to work. But today, that conversation is missing. That conversation isn't happening. It's a very traditional conversation, and that is what is exciting, that there is an opportunity to really start the conversation in a way that hasn't been done before. So what I'll share with you is this. As of a few weeks ago, I am no longer with the Society of Grown-Ups. And so I find myself in a very interesting place where this has become real and very adult and very grown-up immediately. Because I'm asking myself questions like, well, what am I going to do next? And I have to pay my rent. And how do I think about, how do I actually balance the values that I have about creating impact and social change and making the world better with the fact that there's some financial realities that I have to really face up to. And so that's where the next piece comes in. And I know that among this group, this is something that you're already doing this, which is the great brands and great designers understand empathy. They understand a lack of judgment. And they understand that you really, really have to feel your user's pain and your user's joy in order to really build something that makes sense for them. And I think that this is an amazing opportunity for us to do exactly that, which is to turn to one another and say, yeah, let's talk about it. It's an uncomfortable conversation, and maybe I don't have all the answers, but we have to start somewhere. We can't afford to just continue to ignore it. And there is power in that knowledge. If you know how much other people make, you know what you can ask for in this world. If you don't, then you are already at a disadvantage. If you immediately get a stomachache when you hear the word negotiation, like I do, that means you're leaving money on the table. And it means that people who are negotiating are getting what they want and what they deserve. And so understanding that this is a conversation that is deeply uncomfortable, that has really deep roots, that is wrapped up in judgment, what I'll say to you is this: it is never too late to start that conversation. And it is our responsibility to do that. Because if you're taking the time to live your passion and to live your dream and to do the things that are really important to you, then why wouldn't you make sure that you are on good financial footing? as you're being able to do those things. So that's a little bit about, what my passion really is, which is opening up this taboo conversation and doing it in an interesting and different way, which means coming at this problem in a way that has never been done before, whether it's over a glass of wine or whether it's through taking design to a new level, whether it's about taking a process that used to look like, a traditional certified financial planner will sit down with you for a few sessions for thousands and thousands of dollars, and then they will come back to you with a life plan for the next 15 or 20 years. And then the minute something shifts, or the minute that something changes, your plan may or may not work for you. And that's because we're flexible and we're evolving humans, and sometimes that process just doesn't accommodate for that. So there's so much more work to do, and there's just such an amazing opportunity to do that, and there's simply too much at stake not to. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I would love to answer any questions that you guys might have.
If anybody has a question, just feel free to raise your hand. Nondini will pick you and we'll keep rolling.
At which point in time? What did my parents say about which side, which part? Oh yeah. So my parents, I think have been shocked and surprised by some of my choices already. So I'll give you an example. So I had started my career, I'm an anthropology Spanish major, which really screams financial stability. And I graduated in 2002, and the job market was really bad. And I ended up accidentally going to a practice interview and working for a financial institution for the next 5 years, leading their digital strategy. And my parents were extremely relieved. And then I said, so I'm not going to do the banking thing anymore. I'm going to go work for a self-sustaining nonprofit that works with drug addicts and felons. That was an interesting conversation. And listen, I was like, listen, we can put real business principles behind real social problems, and we can make this work. And my dad was like, so how much money are you going to make? And I was like, okay, so for the first year, I'm going to be a volunteer. So that's $0. And then the next year, I'm going to make $12,000. And he was like, okay. And they were really, they were trying to be supportive. They were stressed for me. And they were trying to be supportive, but they understood that there was kind of a pathway to do that. And then, so what I'd say is that when I said that I wanted to lead something like this that was so different and really had never been done before, I think they had already built the scar tissue. They're like, all right, she's just gonna go do that thing. And I don't think they could be any prouder, right? It's a totally unconventional path. My dad is a scientist, my mom is an economist turned visual artist. So you know what, we have a little crazy in our family. So I think that's basically where we ended up. But yeah, thank you for your question. Others?
Yeah. You spoke about college students and how they talk about so many things but it becomes a taboo. Do you have any advice for someone starting there and how we can grow up with having this taboo and learning with it?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's a great question. The first thing is to just acknowledge the fact that it's a taboo conversation and that it's uncomfortable. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people for very, very good reasons. I think that's where it starts. Then I think it's just about saying, listen, you're smart. It is not that hard. It is just not that hard to understand about money. Now listen, some of the jargon is meant to be super confusing and intimidating. But that doesn't mean that the concepts are that difficult. So you spend some time and you educate yourself, and then what I would really recommend is get a group of people together and talk about stuff. Talk about it regularly and just check in with one another. I think that that's what I would recommend. Is there are too many people who are putting who are throwing their bank statements away, who are hiding from their financial realities because, not because they're bad, but because it's painful and because it's hard. And if they had some support, you'd just be in a much, much better place. Listen, just because people went to business school doesn't mean they know anything about personal finance. And just because you're a designer or you work in UX doesn't mean that you don't know what's going on. You can be educated, you can figure that stuff out. So I would just say, first of all, just acknowledge the fact that this is totally within your reach and you can totally do it. And then, when you're ready to learn more, ask questions. Like, the person sitting across from you, you should know how they're paid. And it's not an awkward thing. Like when you go to the doctor, you hopefully tell them like what's really going on with you. So before you spill your guts, just find out. Like, how do you get paid? And how does this work? And are you paid by making recommendations about certain things? And it doesn't matter what the answers to that are. Listen, there are lots and lots of options that are still really, really good across the entire space. But you want to actually feel like you have enough agency to be able to ask those questions.
What other themes and topics that are considered taboo do you think could use this sort of support community approach to help people be as human as they can be and succeed in life?
Yeah, so the question really is what other taboos are there that could actually benefit from this type of approach? And I think that, well, I mean, we talk a lot about, well, let me go back. So we have superficial conversations around a lot of things, like sex and health and things like that. And I think that one of the things that those areas have actually been able to really benefit from is that, well, people recognize that it's uncomfortable and that there's a lot at stake by not having a conversation. I think what's scary about the money conversation is that no one's really said outright that it's taboo, and so people are just kind of in their own worlds being like, I don't know what to do with this, and I think everyone else has it figured out except for me. And that's the biggest thing that I think I learned over the last 2.5 years, which is we used to talk to 20-somethings, and they'd come in, and they'd be like, okay, listen, I don't know a lot about money, but people in their 30s definitely do. And so then we had people in their 30s, and they came in, like, no joke, and they'd be like, yeah, so I don't know that much about it, but married people really know. And then people who are married were like, the guys that have kids totally get it. And then we brought parents in. And this is a highly educated group of parents, standing around, and their kids are like 7, 8, 9. We're like, okay, so how many of you, started, their college funds? And like half of one hand goes up. And that was scary. That was scary because if you even think about the long-term effects of student loan debt, people are not paying that off until they're in their 40s. So if you wait that long to just kind of figure it out, you're leaving so much on the table. So, I don't know a lot about other taboo topics, but I think one of the things that has made money extremely difficult is that no one talks about it holistically and from an emotional context and an empathetic context. And then on top of that, you just assume that next wave actually knows. And truthfully, we have multiple generations that actually don't have really good answers about a lot of this. Yes? Yeah?
What does the future of society and grown-ups look like in your absence, and what awesome things do you see yourself doing in the future?
Oh wow, you really are asking the tough one. Okay, all right. So, Society of Grown-ups, I could not be prouder of what we built, okay? It was a totally disruptive and amazing concept that really got some traction and made differences in people's lives, and I have to tell you, I am truly humbled by the team that I got to do it with. I had just an incredible group of researchers, designers, developers, certified financial planners that were all like just charging ahead to democratize financial literacy. And when you are in a mission-based organization, there is a special kind of crazy sauce there. And it got me up on the really, really tough days. And when it was a really joyful day, there was no place I'd rather be than with all of them. So what I'll tell you is the Society of Grown-ups, I think, is changing strategic direction, and they're moving forward in whatever flavor that is. But as I look back on the 2 years and 9 months when I was the very first person to join, then we built a team of 55 amazing humans, that's a legacy that I can be proud of forever. Now, if you're thinking, like, if you're asking me what I'm gonna do next, okay, so it's been 3 weeks. So I'm like going to day yoga classes, and I go to lunch with people, and they're like, "You look so rested." You know, I haven't really taken a lot of time off, and so this is a good chance for me to do that. But I'm super excited about whatever the next adventure is gonna be. Because if you're talking about like really being able to grapple with a really big problem and doing it with amazing people, sign me up for that. That's what I want to be doing. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Very much so.
Unfortunately, we're going to wrap it up there. Everybody give me one big round of applause.